The tale opens with the protagonist cradling another person, quietly informing him that he is now the sole survivor. A confident smile spread across his face as he used his magic to trap the man by the neck. The restrained man, stunned, insisted that such remarkable abilities were far beyond what any ordinary fixer could have. The hero started asking him about the grimoire, a legendary book known for its immense magical power. The statement emphasized that the family would never gather such a large number of people merely to go after one runaway, and it went on to characterize the family members as worthless individuals who breed and scatter as uncontrollably as wild dogs. The man confessed his lack of knowledge when it came to using the grimoire. The hero realized, as his pursuers refused to give up the chase across such a long distance, that the book he carried must be incredibly important. The man insisted that the grimoire be given to him without delay. In exchange, he promised to speak on his behalf so he could resume his job as a fixer, though he insultingly referred to him as a mere hunting dog. The hero dismissed the offer with a scoff, internally mocking the idea that someone who only managed fixers would have the power to guarantee such things. Using his magic, he raised the man effortlessly into the air and demanded to know if there were any final words to be spoken before his end. Without warning, another individual entered the area, joining the others who were already there. A man radiated an intense, sinister energy as he welcomed the group with a composed demeanor. The newcomer introduced himself as, proclaiming that he led the powerful family who governed magic on the eastern continent. The fixer manager stood in shock, realizing that after years of loyal service to the family, this was his very first direct encounter with the head of the household. Had earned a place in history as the family's most formidable sorcerer, his legend enduring through generations. The hero silently questioned what sort of individual this man could be. Demanded that the hero give him the grimoire, assuring him that they could discuss matters once it was handed over. In response, the hero reacted with unexpected hostility, openly expressing his irritation and telling that he was getting on his nerves. He was accused of attempting to take away the rewards that another had worked so hard to earn. Responded to the disrespect with a mocking chuckle. At that instant, the hero wished he had seized the opportunity to consume the wyvern he encountered earlier, for now he understood just how overpowering and intense the presence radiating from the family leader truly was, far beyond anything he had previously experienced. Informed the hero that the simplest solution would be to end his life and seize the grimoire through violence. However, presented a different choice, suggesting the hero surrender the book and pledge loyalty once more too. In exchange, promised that all of the hero's past wrongdoings would be pardoned. Acknowledged the hero's impressive fighting skills, and confessed that he wished he had recognized this ability earlier. He found it remarkable that someone from the impoverished streets had managed to perfect the basic techniques of fixers and elevate them beyond expectation. With curiosity and ambition, he painted an enticing picture of a promising future, imagining the heights this talented individual might reach with the support of, and pondering the honor he could potentially bring to the family legacy. He finished speaking, encouraging the other person to join him so they could shape the future side by side. The hero accepted his proposal, yet insisted on including a single stipulation. Wearing a sly grin, the hero insisted that surrender his position as the head of the family, making it clear that any negotiations could only take place after this demand was met. He shifted his attention toward and reminded him that he had observed his previous fights. He taunted the weary fixer manager, questioning with sarcasm how many lives had been lost due to the persistent use of his magical ability. Grew upset when confronted with this challenge. No one had told the hero that his decision to proceed in this manner might put his life at risk. The hero silently admitted that this was completely accurate. He countered by presenting an even tougher challenge. He encouraged to assess the difference in their strengths directly. In response, agreed and announced his intention to teach him a lesson first. Initiated an aggressive assault, forcing the hero to evade each strike with considerable effort. Before he had a chance to recover, another magic circle materialized unexpectedly in front of him, catching him off guard. They now understood that this was the genuine strength possessed by the leader of the family. The power offered no weaknesses that could be taken advantage of. Brought up the hero's earlier struggle, emphasizing that certain truths, such as the immense difference in their strengths, were self-evident and did not require proof. He prepared himself and swiftly initiated a new assault. A tremendous blast erupted as a result. Emerging through the swirling smoke, questioned the hero's willingness to reconsider negotiations, warning that he might spare the hero's life, though only by the slimmest margin. The hero wondered aloud whether would welcome him back if he humbled himself, and chose to once again live under shadow. Without hesitation, he responded to his own question, boldly declaring that there was absolutely no chance. Blood streaked the hero's face as he stood up with determination, making it clear through his actions that he was finished tolerating the humiliation of eating scraps meant for dogs. Blue lightning burst forth from him as he launched a powerful assault. He shouted in anger, demanding to know who would willingly return to being a dog, insisting that an expensive collar and a luxurious home did nothing to change the underlying truth. Regarded him with disdain, silently labeling him a fool. Ready to release an immense force, the figure gathered their strength. The hero stood frozen, unable to believe what he was seeing. A tremendous surge of violet lightning streaked across the sky, consuming the heavens in an electrifying storm. At that instant, a realization dawned on him. The reason he had gazed up at the sky on that particular day suddenly became clear to him. They had witnessed the wyvern gliding effortlessly through the open sky, embodying pure freedom. He looked on with anguish, longing deeply for the freedom he yearned to grasp. Even though the attack was intense, the hero remained unshaken. Gazed at him with newfound respect, confessing his surprise that the hero had survived, and then questioned whether the hero could sense the gap between their strengths. Remaining on his feet, the hero recognized the repulsive strength possessed. Sensing a shift, questioned whether the hero was prepared to have a real conversation, and urged him to complete the tale he had previously left unfinished. The hero questioned inwardly whether intended for him to resume the role of a fixer. However, clarified that this was not what he meant, making it clear he was not referring to the fixer position. Unveiled an unexpected proposal, suggesting that the hero take on the role of leading one of the families connected to the lineage. The hero could hardly believe what he was hearing, overwhelmed by astonishment at the suggestion. He reflected on the fact that the family, whose influence nearly matched that of the empire itself, was entrusting him with the leadership of a devoted branch family. The hero gazed at the grimoire he held, his thoughts turning too, as he wondered whether this mysterious book had been subjective all along. Responded by pointing out that the hero continued to doubt his own abilities, making it clear that his true interest lay in the hero as a person, with the grimoire being only a secondary concern. Noticed that the hero's expression had shifted, revealing that he was seriously weighing the proposal. He assured him that taking it would wipe away every wrong he had ever done. All that awaited him was the honor of joining the family's legacy. Without warning, the hero started channeling his power into the grimoire, determined to obliterate it. Stunned by his actions, questioned him in disbelief. The hero responded with a mocking tone, saying that could claim the grimoire once it was reduced to ashes. Warned the hero that a peaceful end would always be out of reach for him. The hero quieted the other person, insisting he pay attention. Then, the hero clarified that fixers were not motivated by wealth. Instead, he had taken the grimoire because its true value could not be measured in money. He proceeded to uncover the hidden truth, questioning inwardly whether was aware of the fixers who had fallen victim to the young master's use of the book's forbidden spells. That villain had consumed the hero's allies, and the family had concealed the wrongdoing. Scoffed at the idea, questioning whether everything had been done simply out of revenge, while remarking with disdain that stray dogs' lives held little value. The hero explained that his actions were driven by more than a desire for vengeance. He also sought to make his fallen friend's ambitions a reality. Earning money became necessary for him, and he was determined to avoid ending up in a shabby place like a doghouse once he retired. After taking in all that was said, announced that the hero's final words had reached his ears. He released his ultimate move, summoning the azure flame of a never-ending blaze that could not be extinguished. The villain demanded that the hero suffer for his decision, forcing him to endure deep remorse within this tormenting place. While fire engulfed his body, the hero firmly dismissed any thoughts of regret. He declared with defiance that he would rather face death than serve once more. He experienced a sense of liberation that had eluded him for years. In his final moments, he felt no regrets. If given another chance at life, he vowed he would claim his own freedom and accomplish the vengeance he truly desired. He did not expect what occurred next, and it caught him off guard. All movement ceased, and it felt as though the entire world had paused in an instant. A radiant light burst forth as the grimoire materialized before them. Unexpectedly, an odd event unfolded. The hero suddenly realized he was in a different location, puzzled by the fact that he was still alive after nearly being consumed by flames. He sensed an unsettling feeling, noticing that the surroundings seemed recognizable, almost as though he had stepped back in time. At that moment, he recalled being in the black and white zone, a harsh place where he had once fought to stay alive every single day before his life changed as a fixer. The astonishing reality dawned on him. He had somehow traveled back to the past. He found himself confused, trying to make sense of the strange situation unfolding around him. He realized he had returned to his younger self. He felt confident that he had traveled back in time, yet he realized the same mark remained on his body. He couldn't explain the reason, but he figured out that the grimoire was responsible for bringing about this return. He recalled how the head of the family had personally arrived to retrieve the book, emphasizing its great significance. The hero concluded that going back in time was beneficial, regardless of the circumstances. He checked to see if he was awake, unable to dismiss the vividness of what had happened. The unmistakable stench of sewage in the air left no doubt in his mind. He was truly alive. He believed this moment held the promise of significant achievement, no matter which path he chose to follow. He found himself questioning the true meaning of reaching great success. He recalled the dream he used to hold, a vision that his companions had embraced as well. This shared aspiration was what ultimately led him to choose retirement. He remembered talking with his comrade, Aster. In that memory, Aster had described how they were no more than homeless people in the black and white zone, missing basic necessities like clothing, food, and education, then wondered aloud which of these hardships he found the hardest to bear. The hero explained that going without food was the hardest challenge to endure. Astor's face showed clear irritation at the foolish reply, but he soon set the record straight. He expressed that lacking access to education had caused him the greatest suffering. Had they received the right training and education, they might have escaped being captured and enslaved by the nobles. After retiring, Aster shared that he hoped to construct a library. It was a space open to everyone, where people from all walks of life could access books without worrying about their riches, position, or identity. The hero longed to push beyond his current limits, aspiring to achieve even greater heights. He dreamed of constructing a lofty spire, driven solely by his fascination with great heights. His intention was to pack this tower with as many books as he could gather. Above all else, he intended to position the family's hidden manual right at the entrance of the first floor, making it accessible to all, be it wandering drifters from the black and white district, noble heirs, or even the market's butchers. The thought of those techniques, once guarded fiercely by the family and valued above their own lives, now being accessible to all filled him with overwhelming joy. He acknowledged that acquiring those techniques posed a challenge, yet he resolved to let his future self handle that obstacle. His main objective was to distribute secrets far and wide, believing that doing so would eventually cause their downfall. Without warning, a strong blow struck his face, shattering the peace of his dreams. A furious young man suddenly showed up and shouted at him for disobeying instructions to remain in his place. Without hesitation, they started striking him with their feet over and over again. Initially, the hero reeled in surprise from the unexpected assault, yet he swiftly drew upon his vast experience as a fixer who had survived innumerable confrontations. The hero skillfully intercepted one of the incoming kicks, catching the attacker off guard with his quick reflexes. Remaining composed, the hero pointed out that he had already landed 7 hits on his opponent. With determination burning in his eyes, he signaled that repayment would come at 10 times the cost. As the hero himself to strike back, dread washed over the attacker's face. A sharp, unmistakable crack echoed through the air as bones snapped. The hero stared in shock at his injured hand, confusion swirling in his mind as he tried to recall how the bones had been broken. The older boy lashed out at him with anger, chastising him harshly for striking someone of greater age. People around him often referred to him as insane. Despite the hero striking his opponent, the young man swiftly overpowered him, slamming the hero onto the ground and relentlessly attacking. Pain surged through the hero's body, but the sorrow weighing on his heart was even heavier. Seizing the moment, the hero swiftly caused the attacker to stumble, sending him tumbling helplessly into a nearby sewage canal. The hero recognized an opportunity to break free. The attacker struggled to his feet, coughing, and demanded to know where the hero was headed. However, the hero stood his ground, making it clear that he had no intention of fleeing. Instead of fighting back, he chose to withdraw strategically, making a mental note of his assailant's features and silently vowing never to forget the pain of the 57 strikes he endured. He recalled his years of experience as a fixer and assured himself that perseverance was in his nature. After relocating, he came to understand just how dire his circumstances were. The pain in his wrist, injured from a single punch, brought on a wave of regret as he recognized how frail his body had become. Feeling overwhelmed by defeat, he lowered himself onto the ground and came to the conclusion that he must set aside any thoughts of the tower for the time being. Instead, he recognized that his main focus should be on repairing and fortifying his frail body. Out of nowhere, a young child with bright white hair stood in front of him, wondering aloud if he needed something to eat. The hero wondered aloud whether he recognized the child, but the child responded that he did not know him. The hero carefully examined the child's attire, noticing that despite their tattered condition, the garments had once been of high quality. From this, he deduced that the boy was probably the offspring of a noble family who had been forced to escape after losing in a fight for power. He regarded the boy as a potential disaster waiting to happen and kept his distance. The child stepped forward, announcing that his name was, and that his mother went by. The hero sensed that he was uncovering secrets best left hidden, which led him to question, wondering aloud if he was perhaps missing something obvious. With an air of innocence, revealed that his mother had passed away, which stirred a sense of sympathy within the hero. He explained that he also grew up without a father, confidently declaring himself the winner of their unspoken competition, and then made a dismissive gesture, signaling for the other person to leave. The hero realized that staying any longer near this volatile situation could only lead to more problems, so he chose to make his exit. However, as he attempted to slip away, insisted on joining him. The hero shook his head in rejection, his mind briefly considering whether using force might drive the other person off. Spotted that the hero's wrist was hurt. He wondered aloud if it was painful and immediately offered his assistance. He rested his hand gently atop the hero's, and suddenly a brilliant healing light emerged, leaving the hero in awe. He quickly understood that this was no ordinary touch. There was something extraordinary about the way it healed. He realized he was witnessing a rare healing ability, a unique power once possessed by the disgraced family before their downfall at the hands of the family. The hero's training as a seasoned fixer sent urgent warnings through his mind. He understood at once that he was now entangled in a situation both risky and unpleasant. He questioned inwardly how a member of the family could have ended up here, since their status should have remained secure during this period. Silently, he turned the name over in his thoughts. Wondered aloud whether someone was trying to get his attention. Without warning, a realization struck him. An important detail surfaced in his mind. A person belonging to the family who possessed eyes of varying colors. He realized who the child standing before him was, the infamous monster from. Was known as the lunatic who survived every attempt on his life, no matter how fatal. The hero stood frozen, unable to grasp the overwhelming disbelief washing over him. His thoughts drifted to earlier days, recalling a period before his downfall when he served as a fixer. He recollected being assigned a task by the family, which sent him to the territory controlled by the family. During that period, he and his fellow soldiers complained among themselves, questioning the need for their involvement in a task the family could have managed on their own. A member of the group shared news of whispers circulating about a terrifying creature lurking in the lands, a beast rumored to have taken the lives of many. They questioned whether the creature could be a ghoul or perhaps something similar. He realized that the figure before him was no ghoul. He witnessed one person violently ripping another apart. The human fought with wild laughter, relying on the family's healing magic to sustain himself through the ongoing battle. Even after meeting his end, the mad butcher continued to live, refusing to be claimed by death. As the recollection faded, the hero found himself back in the present moment. Sat across from him, appearing every bit the curious child, his gaze fixed on a line of ants. The hero remained overwhelmed, struggling to connect the ruthless murderer from his memories with the innocent boy seated nearby. He questions how the sole heir of the family, the Lord's only son, could have ended up in such a wretched situation. Breaks the silence by bringing up the topic of food, pulling the others out of their thoughts. With excitement, he suggested they should have a meal, recalling his mother's advice that good nutrition keeps sickness away, and pointed out that the hero's lack of appetite was probably the reason for his illness. The hero understood the reasoning presented, yet felt unsettled by the confrontational tone. Wanting to shift the conversation, he inquired about whether the other man possessed any money. Reached into his belongings and produced a bag brimming with gold coins, silently questioning if this was what had been requested. Following a brief pause, the hero broke into a warm smile and nodded, signaling approval. Without warning, the hero announced that from this moment on, they were friends. He draped his arm over shoulders, who stood frozen in surprise, and assured him that as long as he called them friends, that's exactly what they were, friends who always shared everything with each other. With enthusiasm, he eagerly leads the other in search of something to eat, hoping to satisfy their hunger. Wanted to know what his new companion had to offer. In response, the hero revealed that he did have something valuable, a friend, and by this he clearly meant. Once the hero finished eating a satisfying meal and enjoying a soothing bath, a renewed sense of energy and freshness washed over them. He notices roaming through what appears to be the living quarters situated above the restaurant. Shares that he has never encountered a place like this before, since he has always spent his nights outdoors. Abruptly reveals that he grew up without a father. The hero made a light-hearted remark about having a father, which sparked a playful disagreement between the two. Their banter soon devolved into a silly argument, leaving the hero puzzled about why they were even trying to outdo each other over something so trivial. At that moment, he brings up the topic of the other boy's mother, wanting to know more about her. Glanced around with an air of innocence, responding that she was nowhere to be seen. The hero, wanting to understand what was happening, chose to take a closer look at the circumstances. The hero wondered aloud about the length of time had spent by himself, paused to consider the question before responding that he had slept 10 times since leaving his home. The hero took a moment to process the recent revelation, questioning whether might be on the run from someone and considering if sleeping 10 times indicated that 10 days had already gone by. Shared that he has the ability to rest 2 times each day, counting both his naps and regular sleep, which means he has slept a total of 10 times. The hero concluded that had likely been fleeing for 3 or 4 days. His confusion deepened as mentioned he hadn't slept at all since running away, leading him to silently admit that madness had overtaken him entirely. The hero started thinking ahead, realizing that having by his side in the black and white zone could be valuable. He imagined taking on the role of protector while also finding a way to connect with the family. He realized that forming this connection might help him later if he had to face the family once more. And he also knew that noble households held many of the rare books he required to pursue his ambitions. Before considering his future, he realizes there is something more pressing on his mind. The deep resentment, built up in 57 layers, that he holds against the young man responsible for striking him earlier. He informed of his intention to rest, and cautioned him that any interruption would lead to serious consequences. Wondered aloud whether the hero planned to start with breathing exercises. The hero nodded and explained that should try them too once he finished. Excited by the suggestion, readily agreed. The hero settled into meditation, his thoughts drifting back to a previous existence when he depended on the usual magical formulas assigned to fixers, each one bound by well-defined constraints. In order to conquer this challenge, he had secretly entered numerous aristocratic households and taken their treasured skills, often escaping death by a narrow margin. He mastered hidden techniques such as enhancing his body like a knight, harnessing spiritual powers, calling forth creatures, and practicing alchemy. He recalled how every skill he had learned still failed to match the overwhelming strength of the family's leader, whose devastating power had brought him to the brink of death. Determined to grow stronger, he chooses to study the very core technique of the family, the celestial source art. This technique served as the foundation for every skill and could blend seamlessly with any form of mana. Fortunately, he had committed it to memory during his previous life for the sake of his studies. As he started to use the breathing technique, a change began within him. A searing warmth, as fierce as molten lava, surges through his entire body. He is taken aback when he notices impurities within his. In order to drive them away, he taps into a hidden and enigmatic force called the mana shower. The method was practiced exclusively by highly skilled sorcerers who belonged to prestigious noble lineages. They aimed to cleanse their bloodline by focusing solely on their direct descendants. Once the procedure concludes, he regains consciousness and starts to question how long he has been unconscious. Even more significant, he discovers that his mana pathways are now free of impurities, and his magical energy feels refined, possibly even than it ever was in his previous existence. Even with this notable progress, he comes to understand that, no matter how many lives he might have, overcoming would always feel unattainable. Despite facing overwhelming obstacles, his prospects had begun to look brighter, and he remained the kind of person who persisted no matter how slim the chances of success. The following morning, opened his eyes and was startled to notice his hair had become brown overnight. To him, the hero had altered both his platinum hair and his clothing in secret, ensuring the family would not be able to identify him. Once the last detail of the disguise had been finished, turned to his friend, curious about what their next move would be. The hero boldly declares their intention to teach their opponents a lesson, determined to take action and show their strength. After taking a nap, the young man who had struck the hero earlier began to walk. He hadn't expected to encounter the hero once more, especially now that the hero appeared well-groomed and had a different child by his side. He demanded to know where the boy had been roaming and commented on his neat look. As his gaze shifted, he spotted nearby and quickly realized, judging by his well-kept outfit, that the newcomer was likely wealthy. Without warning, the hero unleashed a strong punch, sending his opponent crashing to the floor. He then explained in a steady voice that simply recalling his face would suffice, and stated that the tally between them would begin with 123 strikes. In the same neighborhood, a pair of young men noticed a disturbance nearby and decided to investigate the source of the noise. A crowd of teenagers assembled, their attention quickly drawn to the youngest among them. The group watched in astonishment at his actions. The hero's lips curled into a cunning smile as he surveyed the crowd, recognizing every face in the room. He wondered just how much he could accomplish on this attempt. A fierce fight broke out. He defeated each of them in turn, overpowering his opponents individually. The hero showcased his remarkable fighting abilities, landing powerful blows on his enemies with hands glowing with mystical energy. Stood mesmerized, deeply struck by the remarkable swiftness and strength his new companion displayed. The hero explained to that whenever he found himself in these kinds of moments, it was important to talk about what he observed in a way that made it sound really impressive. Eagerly echoed the words, his eyes shining with excitement. Walked up to the first young man and suggested that he could help treat his wounds. The hero reached out and seized the other man, demanding to know the number of blows he had already endured. He reached down and grabbed a stick made of wood that was lying on the ground. The adult struck the boy firmly on his backside with the object. She inquired once more about the number of blows he had received, but fear overwhelmed the young man, causing him to stumble over his words and forget the exact count. The hero shifted his gaze to his companion and indicated that it was now's chance to act. Smiled as he gently placed his hands on the wounded young man, channeling his healing power. The young man, overwhelmed by agony and terror, cried out desperately and pleaded for to stop. The hero informed the young man that their fight was not over, and he still owed him 20 more blows. This announcement caused the young man to cry out in terror and grow increasingly frantic, desperately shouting the hero's name and referring to him as devils. Once the disciplinary session concluded, a young man stepped forward, showing respect as he acknowledged the hero's efforts and commended him for a job well done. The hero felt a surge of pride as he reflected on his accomplishments. Even for someone as experienced as him, handing out 2,000 hits by giving 100 to each individual was an unfamiliar and demanding task. The weary young people sought the hero's approval to depart, and he granted their request. One of them, with uncertainty in their voice, revealed that they called this place home, and because of that were unable to go elsewhere. The hero's face shifted, and he assured everyone that this issue was minor. Confronted by the hidden menace, the young people hastily insisted that they would depart, then hurriedly escaped from their house. While the hero observed their retreat, a realization dawned on him. He no longer had a place to call home. Just as this thought settled in, he sensed the presence of someone drawing near from afar. The individual moved with swift, silent precision, carrying the unmistakable presence of an experienced fixer. The hero realized that someone must be following them. He suspected that the family had located him sooner than he anticipated, and he felt anxious since the recent battle and purification had drained almost all of his mana. He recognizes that he is unable to cast any spells or engage in combat due to his weakened condition. Yet he recalls that, deep down, he is a skilled fixer with a wealth of experience. He remembers that, even in his previous existence, he never possessed much magic and constantly encountered challenging circumstances. Because of this, facing hardships feels familiar to him. He started to collect every bit of mana he had left. He gathered all the mana he could muster, confident that it would suffice for a single, powerful strike. He realizes that his survival depends on making the right move now, as there will be no second opportunity. When the person chasing them finally catches up, he reveals himself not as a foe, but as an old man who respectfully addresses as young master. The man, who identified himself as Alfred, appeared greatly relieved upon locating, revealing that his worries had been so intense they had robbed him of sleep. Adamantly rejects the idea of returning, his voice rising in a desperate shout as he insists that he would rather die than go back. Meanwhile, Alfred, the butler, gently attempts to soothe fear, doing his best to convince him to reconsider. The hero comes to understand that departure from his family was simply the act of a frightened child fleeing his home. Alfred, who served as the butler for the family, expressed his apologies to the protagonist for the earlier commotion and proceeded to give a proper introduction of himself. In response, the protagonist revealed that his name was Aster. Observing the interaction, Alfred realized that the young master appeared to hold Aster in high regard. With this in mind, Alfred extended an invitation for Aster to join them on their way to the family estate. The hero harbored doubts about their intentions, aware of the widespread disdain noble families held for commoners. Despite this, he struggled to grasp the real reason behind their invitation. He chooses to go along with the invitation because it fits perfectly with his goal of building a connection with the family. This influential family oversees the main gateway to Hazen, the city that houses the renowned Zenith Academy and its unmatched library. Because his ambition is to create an impressive library, he realizes that exploring their library could help him reach his objective. Viewing it as a minor sidestep on his journey toward his aspiration, he agrees to the invitation. The hero faced with a bright smile, proposing that they check out whether the family's cooking lived up to its reputation. Upon reaching the grand estate belonging to the family, the hero reflects on how this marks his very first formal visit to their impressive mansion. Alfred pointed out that the hour was growing late and suggested they get some rest. He then entrusted them to a maid named Lassie. As Lassie attempted to guide away, her intense stare frightened the child, causing him to break down in tears and repeatedly beg for her forgiveness. In another part of the mansion, a soft creak signaled that someone had just opened a door. The owner of the mansion inquired about whereabouts, directing the question to Alfred. In response, the butler explained that had been discovered in the 7th black and white zone and was currently returning. The figure revealed herself to be a woman, and she released a furious burst of magic that erupted into a powerful explosion. She frantically inquired about well-being, her worry quickly turning to anger as she warned of severe repercussions should anything have happened to him. Alfred, maintaining his composure, requested that she settle herself and pay attention as he delivered his report. Once the woman hears the report, a wave of relief washes over her. Alfred noted inwardly that this turn of events brought good fortune not only to the lady, but also to anyone who may have wronged the young master. He recalls that this woman had previously been referred to as the Blood Witch. He reflects that, considering her strong-willed personality, particularly when protecting her child, it is a relief that events concluded as they did. The woman expresses her gratitude to him for all his efforts. Alfred explained that he had only been fulfilling his responsibilities, yet he mentioned there was something odd about the situation, catching her interest. Alfred mentions that has recently befriended someone named Aster. He explained to the woman that Aster had already detected his arrival and had set up defenses long before he showed himself. He mentions that during their encounter, Aster had in hand a concentrated form of magic prepared for a strike. The woman found herself genuinely amazed, noting to herself how extraordinary Astor's abilities were, especially considering he came from the black and white zone. Recognizing his unique skill, Alfred approached the woman and requested a special favor from her. In a subsequent scene, Alfred faces the hero and unexpectedly proposes that the hero take his place as his successor. Alfred appeared certain that the hero would accept without hesitation. He tells him that, for someone from the black and white zone, a chance like this offers the possibility of gaining both riches and respect. The hero answers in a rude manner, making it clear that he has no interest. Alfred felt a surge of surprise and questioned whether he had understood what was just said. Suddenly breaks into the moment, wanting to know what his friend meant by the word he had just whispered. The hero thanked them sincerely for considering him as the butler's successor, but he turned down the offer with respect, explaining that he would rather keep things just as they were. Alfred perceives the hero's rejection as a sign of pride. He assumes the hero, an orphan who taught himself magic and became highly skilled, now considers himself superior to others. He proceeded to address the hero, explaining that his own upbringing had been humble and marked by arrogance during his younger years. Eventually, he had come to recognize just how immense the world truly was, and in this way, he felt a kinship with the hero's struggles. The hero's expression tightened with irritation, while he considered how pointless the conversation felt. Alfred went on with his lecture, pointing out that although the hero might believe he is unstoppable and capable of ruling the world, reality does not operate that simply. The hero struggled to contain his rising anger as Alfred observed him closely, likening the hero to the sheltered goblins from the valleys, beings who matured in safety and remained oblivious to the true perils lurking beyond their haven. The hero considered silently that, had he truly been as naive or vulnerable as a goblin, he would have already become prey for a wyvern, revealing his awareness and strength. Alfred's demeanor grew more severe as he insisted that the hero's ignorance was absolute. He planned to show him firsthand just how immense and frightening the world could be. Alfred stepped forward and pushed open the doors, revealing a spacious hall beyond. A group of youthful butler trainees stood in formation, ready to welcome him as he arrived. Alfred turned to the hero, seeking his thoughts. He gestured toward the group of young men, explaining that they were all promising members of the family and close to the hero's age. Alfred assured him that their abilities were evident. The hero observes the group in silence, inwardly acknowledging that abilities are truly remarkable. He observes how astonishing it is that such polished presence comes from mere teenagers, their impressive aura dominating the whole room. He gazed into their eyes, his thoughts laced with sarcasm as he remembered the goblins that once inhabited this place, silently concluding that these opponents were insignificant compared to the threats he had previously overcome. Alfred repeated his question, assuring him that by accepting the offer, he could become just as brilliant as the other children, perhaps even surpassing them. The hero explained that he preferred not to stand out, and this response irritated Alfred. One of the trainees moved to the front and spoke directly to the head butler. With a mocking grin, remarked to Alfred that if the boy had genuinely cared, he would have accepted the offer without hesitation. Because the boy had turned it down, believed he still failed to understand both the importance of the role and the remarkable abilities gathered in the hall. Offered to demonstrate genuine magic to the hero, suggesting they engage in a practice duel as a form of training. Alfred considers the suggestion conceited, yet he decides to go along with it. Alfred proposed that the hero should engage in a brief duel with. The hero comes to understand that his actions have started to cause trouble for his enemies. They viewed him as nothing more than a fortunate stray who had wandered indoors, and he realized this. The hero accepted the challenge and requested the right to select his own opponents, a condition that Alfred granted. The hero singled out, along with 4 other trainees, by gesturing in their direction. He boldly declared his intention to challenge all 5 opponents at the same time, leaving the group stunned by his confidence. He dismissed their fears with a mocking laugh, cruelly suggesting that those who were frightened might as well give up on living. Alfred let out a laugh, clearly impressed, and thought to himself that this was exactly the kind of attitude he wanted in the person who would take his place. He cautions that such remarks might be seen as an offense against the family and questions whether he is ready to accept the consequences. With assurance, the other responds that he is willing to do so. Alfred explained the rules of the duel, making it clear that the hero needed to endure for precisely 1 minute. Should the hero manage this feat, a reward awaited him, but failure would mean facing the consequences of his earlier statements. The hero comes to understand that taking responsibility would require him to step into the role of head butler. He perceives this as Alfred's way of tying him down, yet he still chooses to accept the conditions presented to him. While getting ready for the duel, one trainer shared his worries with Alfred, fearing that the upcoming match could be too risky. Alfred explains that the risk involved gives the situation its value, since he is convinced that challenging the boy's stubborn nature is essential for his development. The person responsible for training the 5 new recruits felt anxious. He believed that if any harm came to the guest of the young master, it might cost him his job forever. At the same time, observed the interaction between the maid and Lassie. The trainer hurried over, desperately pleading with him to intervene and prevent the head butler's actions, urgently explaining that his friend's life was at serious risk. His enthusiasm grew even stronger, causing the trainer's fear to intensify. Lassie stepped in and warned that his mother would reprimand him if he got involved, prompting to hold back his frustration. Alfred instructed the nervous trainer to start the match, leaving no room for hesitation. The trainer reflected on his efforts to protest, yet recognized he had no choice but to follow instructions. Lassie informed that she would return shortly and requested that he refrain from getting involved. Smiled warmly, assuring her that he understood what she meant. The trainer went over the guidelines for the duel, outlining that it would proceed in a turn-based manner similar to a structured sparring match. He let out a quiet scoff, viewing the fight as a full-blown annihilation match rather than a simple sparring session. The trainer clarifies that this duel is a battle of total defeat, lasting until one participant gives up, though he reserves the authority to halt the fight at any moment. Ridiculed the hero, comparing him to a lost dog who owed his survival to mere fortune. He declared his intention to defeat the hero and expose who he truly was. The trainer raised his voice to signal the beginning of the duel, prompting one of the challengers to charge forward and launch an attack against the hero. Once the duel commenced, the hero wasted no time and struck with a forceful blow to the chest, stunning him and causing intense pain. Let out a terrified scream, unable to comprehend the shocking event that had just occurred. At the same time, the hero revealed it in his palm and declared that it was now his turn to teach. He explained that the first thing to remember was how the tiniest peppers often pack the most heat. Realized that the move relied on a simple control of mana, a method too weak to be useful in a real fight. The hero moved on to his next point, emphasizing the importance of withholding judgment about others, and then demonstrated his power by firing a mana bullet. With a tremendous blast, the bullet erupted, hurling all 5 trainees high into the air. As the hero swung a powerful punch at, he reflected on the vastness and harshness of the world. He offered the trainees, who had just faced defeat, a chance to learn important lessons from him, advising them to study the material carefully. Raised his voice, accusing the other man of insanity, and insisting that the power he wielded was something other than magic. The hero relies on somatic magic, a unique technique that blends the power of mana with physical combat skills, allowing him to defeat his enemies through a mix of magic and martial arts. The trainer stands frozen, utterly astonished by the incredible display of strength unfolding before him. As Alfred stands by, he observes the hero effortlessly defeat every challenger. Alfred carefully observed the hero's method, soon understanding that the mana bullet had been compacted no less than 3 or 4 times. He reflects on their initial encounter, realizing that a direct hit from that bullet back then could have put him in serious danger. He feels a deep sense of admiration for the hero's natural ability to command mana with such ease. He believed the hero's method of overcoming his enemies was truly frightening. Without warning, Alfred becomes aware that Lady is near, leaving him momentarily frozen in surprise. Lady appeared alongside Lassie, filling the trainer with renewed hope as the trainer became convinced that was there to rescue them. The woman inquired about the situation, prompting Alfred to respond with uncertainty, explaining that they had merely been performing a routine experiment. The woman surveyed the scene, noticing the disorder and the wounded trainees scattered across the ground. With a hint of sarcasm, she questioned whether this was truly what he considered a test. She instructs Alfred to collect the trainees and lead them away from the area for the time being. She requested that the hero go back to his room, leaving him silently lamenting the unfortunate turn of events. The woman called for the trainer and dismissed him instantly with just one word. She faced Alfred and expressed her understanding of what he meant to do, though she believed he had crossed a line. Realizing his mistake, Alfred offered a sincere apology, confessed that he let his anger get the better of him, and said he would take whatever consequences came his way. The woman shifted the conversation to a new topic, requesting a detailed account of the duel and expressing curiosity about whether had offered his assistance. Alfred shook his head in refusal, offering an explanation that the hero's impressive skill came from an extraordinary knack for striking accurately. Alfred expressed regret for having been distracted, and explained that the hero had relied on the same mana bullet technique once more during the duel. On this occasion, however, he had managed to condense it 3 or 4 times more than before. The woman realizes that the hero must have impressive mastery over mana, and although she kept a calm appearance, she inwardly acknowledges her great surprise. She stared in disbelief, trying to comprehend how he could have taken down 5 trainees using only a single mana bullet. Alfred reassured her that he had managed the feat by himself, explaining that most skilled mages struggle to control raw mana directly and usually depend on spells instead. Lady inquired about the proposal Alfred had extended to the boy. In response, Alfred explained that he had firmly turned it down. The lady grew more curious after being refused, prompting her to reconsider her opinion of Aster and instruct her attendants to bring him before her. The hero received a summons to appear before Lady. She greeted him warmly and offered him a seat, as sitting next to her and still chewing his food looked on. The hero acknowledged that he had been called by the lady, and she nodded in agreement before mentioning that there was something else she needed to discuss with him first. She handed him a box and mentioned that she learned Alfred had made a promise to give him a present. The hero recalled that Alfred had promised him a reward if he could endure for a full minute. but he was surprised to see that the lady had already arranged the present herself with such speed. She gestures toward the box, indicating that he should open it. The hero opens the box and finds a rare, high-grade elixir inside. This valuable item is so exclusive that even members of the family do not receive it, unless they are among the few recruits chosen for the top 5 magical squads. The hero eyed the generous offerings with doubt, fully aware that treasures like these were rarely given without strings attached. Lady offered comfort, letting him know that the elixir was both a token of gratitude for his assistance in the black and white zone, and a way to make amends for the trouble caused during the duel. The hero looked at her and questioned whether consuming the elixir would tie him to the family, but she confidently assured him that it would not. Still uncertain, he pressed further, wondering if the potion was laced with poison, and she calmly insisted that it was safe. He seeks reassurance that no hidden terms exist, and the woman assures him, encouraging him to accept it freely. Grateful, the protagonist expresses his thanks and takes the present. The hero viewed the elixir as a surprising reward, yet the lady revealed she had a different offer in mind. Realizing this, the hero silently acknowledged that he had anticipated as much. The woman extends an opportunity for him to receive a scholarship so that he can join at the academy. She clarified that studies were originally scheduled to begin the previous year. He firmly resisted the idea, causing them to delay their plans, and she was completely unprepared for his decision to leave home just to escape attending the academy. The woman clarifies that her request for assistance stems from admiration for the man, and eagerly agrees, expressing that he would gladly attend as long as his friend accompanies him. The hero notices that Lady is struggling with a difficult situation. She knew that if she forced to attend, he might end up running away once more, but she couldn't think of any other method to make him reconsider. The hero recognizes the offer as a promising chance, understanding that enrolling in the academy brings significant advantages. In a society where relationships built through family and local networks matter greatly, the connections formed at school hold immense value. Despite the generous offer, he senses that he is becoming entangled in the matters of the family. He lets her know that he needs some time to consider the matter, and she nods in understanding, requesting that he update her once he has made up his mind. Before departing, she stops him and wants to know the reason he turned down Alfred's proposal to take his place. The hero offered a cryptic smile, hinting that his knees held great value, which only deepened the lady's confusion. In another place, Alfred reacts with disbelief and astonishment at the boldness shown by the boy. Once Aster acquired the elixir, he settled down in deep thought, allowing its energy to flow into him. He was astonished to discover that his mana had surged dramatically, even though he had only taken in 1/10 of the elixir. He questioned internally whether the impressive absorption was a result of his body's transformation, which had now become the symbol of fire. He observed that the absorption went flawlessly. Normally, taking in an elixir would leave behind some wasted energy or traces of impurities, but this time, everything was completely pure, making the outcome even more powerful than he had expected. His mind wandered to the invitation he had gotten from the academy. After much reflection, he realized he had already reached his choice. He came to understand that joining the academy offered numerous benefits, with the greatest being the increased likelihood of securing a sponsor to back him. Although there were many good signs, he couldn't shake the uneasy suspicion that he was heading directly into a snare laid out just for him. He chose to take a walk, hoping it would help organize his thoughts. Just as he reached the door, a young man with striking platinum hair appeared, having waited there specifically to intercept him. She then confronted him and inquired whether he was the individual known as Aster. Aster studied the young man carefully, noting his platinum hair, a trait unique to within the immediate family, and concluded that the young man was likely a distant relative connected through an extended branch of the family. Aster grew increasingly frustrated with the constant chaos in the house, and insisted that the name had nothing to do with her. The young man did not expect this, and felt a wave of surprise. The young man persisted with his mocking tone, making fun of Astor's lifeless, charcoal-colored hair and the uneasy way he looked around. He went on to tease that these qualities matched him exactly, which made Aster upset. In response, Aster kept his composure and pointed out that hair color often looks different depending on the light. He adopted a look of false innocence, masking his true intentions behind a carefully crafted expression. She inquired of the young man, expressing her disbelief that eyes like these could ever cause discomfort. The young man, surprised by his own response, lowered his gaze and conceded that Astor's eyes truly appeared gentle. He apologized for the confusion and then turned away to depart. Right then, Alfred, who served as the chief butler, hurried over to Aster and seized him firmly. He pleaded for forgiveness over the mix-up, explaining that he had spent the entire night restless, unable to sleep because he hadn't had the chance to clear things up with him. Alfred silently fumed, feeling it was unfair to kneel solely due to his position as head butler, convinced that everything had been a simple mistake. Meanwhile, the young man with platinum hair spun back toward him, a look of realization dawning on his face. He loudly declared that he had been correct from the beginning, insisting that the unusual expression in Aster's eyes, one that reminded him of a lifeless goblin, was something rarely seen. Aster responded with composure, affirming who he was. The young man's anger flared as he jabbed his finger toward the other person, his words sharp and accusing, claiming the other was both deceitful and disrespectful in his actions. The young man whispered a deadly warning, yet Alfred's cold, piercing stare kept him quiet. The young man decided to withdraw his threat, letting Aster know that he would ignore the incident for the moment. Still, he insisted that Aster visit the magic hall later, where he intended to address and correct Aster's improper conduct. Aster responded with casual indifference. Once the young man departed, grumbling under his breath with threats, Alfred turned to Aster and inquired if something was bothering him. Aster smiled reassuringly, assuring everyone that there was no cause for concern, while inwardly he considered how perfectly timed this situation was. Since he was already feeling upset, his mood didn't improve. Astor shifted his attention to Alfred and addressed him formally, using his title of head butler. He inquired whether it was possible for him to meet the mistress of the palace at that moment. Lady greeted Aster as she invited her into the office. He observed that he had asked for a meeting at an unusually early hour, and questioned whether he had already made up his mind about her proposal. Astor's confident smile showed that he had made up his mind. He let her know about his plans to join the academy. Lady was taken aback by the speed of his decision, remarking on how swiftly he had come to a conclusion. She felt satisfied and expressed her approval, urging him to start getting ready without delay. She invited him to relax while he waited. Grateful for her kindness, Astor expressed his thanks before stepping out of the office. Once Astor had departed, Alfred made his way into the office. Lady inquired about the young boy, and with a cheerful tone, she let the head butler know that Aster had gratefully agreed to the proposal. Alfred's excitement was obvious, as he remarked that such enthusiasm was only natural for a boy so full of passion. A fiery determination glowed within his eyes. Alfred eagerly outlined his strategy to Lady, mentioning that the family would handle his costs for the first semester. However, he expressed uncertainty about how Astor would cope with the financial burden in the following term. Alfred believed that someone living in poverty in the gray zone would struggle to pay for such expensive tuition. It was anticipated that Aster would grow increasingly worried, as he was eager to pursue his education further. At that pivotal instant, someone would always step forward to offer assistance. The sponsorship in question belonged exclusively to Alfred himself. Lady cut him off with a composed remark about the excessive noise he was making. Realizing his mistake, Alfred quickly expressed his regret and left the room, heading to the kitchen since it was almost time to eat. Once he had departed, Lady found herself lost in thought over the situation. She realized just how joyful Alfred felt. After facing several refusals from Aster, he had at last discovered a chance. Despite considering the academy proposal, she regarded it as an overly simplistic idea. She understood that Alfred's unwavering belief in the plan stemmed from his own experience. He had once been persuaded by the previous head butler through a comparable tactic. She him inwardly, thinking of him as an unfortunate soul. At the same time, Aster made her way down the path. He headed toward the hall where magic was practiced. The area housed the boy, whom he mentally referred to as the one from the side branch. As he stepped into the room, a figure cloaked in a hooded robe appeared, holding a flickering candle. The mysterious person paused and inquired about the reason for his visit. Aster paused briefly, suddenly aware that the name of the young man he was supposed to meet remained a mystery to him. The hooded figure appeared to anticipate his arrival, greeting him warmly and signaling for him to come along. The hooded man guided him toward a doorway, explaining that this was the entrance he should use. Just before departing, he issued an enigmatic caution, suggesting that he should be careful about what might be above him once the door was opened. Aster pushed the door open and was instantly met with a chaotic swirl of airborne papers, realizing at once why the warning had been given. Dust billowed into his face as the paper fluttered past him. Aster stood before a young man with platinum hair, who reached out to shake his hand and offered a friendly greeting. The youth announced his name to be. The person inquired whether Aster was there to visit his little brother. Suddenly, Aster was struck by the realization that the impolite boy he had encountered before had summoned his older sibling for assistance. Aster suddenly recalled his days working undercover as a fixer, slipping unnoticed into one magic academy after another. He left with a valuable insight into the unique traits that defined research mages. He referred to them as the pen pushers. The most noticeable feature that set them apart was their receding hairlines. Their constant worrying and overanalyzing led them to tug at their hair so often that it eventually refused to grow back. Aster had broken down this occurrence into several distinct phases. During the initial phase, individuals attempted to conceal their hair loss by keeping the hoods of their robes pulled over their heads. During the second stage, they came to terms with the truth and allowed others to see their sparse hair. During the third stage, participants had their heads fully shaved. During the fourth and last phase, individuals would become so desperate that they began to seek out magical solutions for problems no one had ever solved, such as restoring lost hair. However, stood out from the rest. He started by expressing sincere regret for how his younger brother had acted, admitting that his brother's actions had crossed a line, and that he never expected such disrespect toward a guest of the young family head. While was talking, Aster observed that his hair was full, and he appeared quite youthful, which challenged the assumption Aster had previously created in his thoughts. As attended to Aster T, she inquired about his occupation at a magic academy, to which disclosed that he was actually the vice principal at one such institution. Astor felt a sense of admiration, realizing that the esteemed family must have chosen this person for the role due to genuine merit, not just because of their family background. This meant that had to be incredibly talented. Noted that Aster stood out from the typical wanderers found in the black and white zone, recognizing something unusual about her character. Aster let out a laugh that matched the mood, yet a sense of discomfort lingered within him. In his mind, he imagined that things might have been simpler if had greeted him with anger, but instead offered a gentle, welcoming smile. Aster sensed an unspoken tension that made it clear they were simply not the kind of people who would ever see eye to eye. After the announcement, offered his congratulations to Aster for being invited to join Xenian Academy, and Aster expressed his gratitude in return. As spoke on, praising the opportunity and proudly noting that he had once graduated with the 145th class, Aster silently questioned whether was now attempting to create a sense of camaraderie between them based on their school connection. Quickly expressed regret for his earlier outburst, admitting that the excitement over his enrollment had caused him to speak out of turn. Wanting to move on, he proposed they focus on the main topic. Aster found herself curious about what the central idea might be. Before anything else, mentioned that there was something he needed to clarify. Then, without hesitation, he posed a bold and startling question. Was his companion prepared to put his own life on the line for the sake of a friend? Revealed that the future of the entire family hung in the balance. The man extended a radiant book toward Aster, assuring him that the book would be his if he dared to stake his life. The unexpected proposition left Aster completely astonished. He instantly identified the book before him. It held the family's greatest secret, known as the Tome of Healing Light. At the same time, the palace garden bloomed with vibrant yellow flowers. Lady carefully cared for the blooming flowers in the garden. She exhaled deeply, grateful that admission into the academy, once a source of constant worry, had been settled smoothly, allowing her to finally feel at ease. Her mind drifted to memories of Aster. She regarded him as one of his closest friends. She recognized that he was quite talented, and when it came to his character, she remembered how Alfred had described him, sometimes brash or impolite, but she thought that was typical behavior for someone his age. She was most drawn to his calm and reliable nature. He remained unimpressed, showing no attempt to flatter despite discovering his history and position. She realized that his position set him apart, which justified allowing him to remain near them. Because of this, she was convinced he would always be an outsider, much like a wild bird meant to soar rather than be confined. She believed that several methods existed to maintain relationships with others, realizing she would need to reflect on these approaches gradually. She remained resolute, unwilling to abandon her remarkable ability just because of. Inside the magic hall, Aster remained stunned, unable to process that had just proposed giving him the family's secret tome. He found himself questioning what the true reason for the offer might be. He observed S's gaze, noticing how open and honest it appeared. He found himself unable to decipher his own thoughts. Aster believed that most people's emotions, whether kind or cruel, could usually be seen in their eyes. However, his expression remained as unreadable as a trained assassin, revealing nothing at all. From this, he realized that hid behind such a complex disguise that even himself might have lost touch with who he really was. Cautioned that his words carried weight and urged the other not to rush into a response simply because of the enticing reward offered. In response, Aster assured that he would provide his decision. Within the confines of his mind, Aster sensed his earlier anxiety dissolving as he came to comprehend's true character. The situation suddenly seemed much simpler to him. He understood that they both came from similar difficult backgrounds, which made him feel at ease instead of uneasy. Aster informed that he was open to hearing any questions might have. He clarified that he would help if he believed he was capable, but if he felt unable to do so, he would choose not to get involved. His temper flared at the remark, and he demanded to know whether the other person would truly pay attention, even if doing so could put his life at risk. Went so far as to warn that he might take drastic action if the person heard him out and then chose not to comply. Aster met his gaze with bold defiance, challenging him to follow through with the threat. With a biting hint of sarcasm, Aster questioned whether it was even possible for someone to die a second time. He suddenly recalled, feeling awkward, that he alone faced the risk of dying once more. After a brief pause, unleashed his aura, aiming to overwhelm Aster with an intimidating presence. Attempted to overwhelm Aster by releasing an intense surge of his aura, hoping it would compel Aster to yield. Aster remained firm, showing no sign of intimidation in response to his warning. Grinned and confessed his inability to surpass Aster, announcing that he had successfully completed the trial. Informed him that from that moment on, he would address him in a more relaxed and familiar manner. He realized that exposing the truth required help from someone reliable, but he knew that person could not belong to the family. Started to describe what he was going through, confessing that at first he didn't expect much. He had assumed every wanderer from the black and white zone was the same, and he doubted that someone as young as could accurately judge a person's character. Despite his initial impressions, what truly caught his attention was the fact that Lady's devoted guardian, renowned for her deep affection toward him, allowed someone as unrefined as Aster to remain close to. This unusual choice convinced him that there had to be something remarkable about Aster. By an unexpected twist of fate, his younger brother ended up getting into a confrontation with Aster. The situation gave him an ideal and reasonable reason to call the other person in for a meeting. Aster wondered aloud whether the vice principal of the Magic Academy truly needed to involve his own brother as a reason to call someone in. Acknowledged that Aster had guessed the truth, admitting that the circumstances were complicated and kept him from acting first. He was quick to dismiss any idea of internal conflict, emphasizing instead that the family was united and supportive. He went on to disclose the true cause, admitting that the family had been keeping a close watch on him. Aster wanted to know the reason, so she posed the question to him. Chose to speak with complete honesty, remembering how Aster had once seemed unfazed by the idea of death. Despite this, made it clear that he did not plan to harm him. Disclosed a startling revelation. He had been investigating the celestial source technique of the family, but it appeared that his actions had not gone unnoticed by them. He explained that he had come across this technique, an exclusive secret of the family, by an unforeseen means. Aster wondered aloud to how someone believed to be dead for years could still be living, then pointed out that if the family was conducting an investigation, their main purpose would likely be to discover a method to oppose him. Observed that the family often acted without reason. He believed that even if his involvement was limited to studying a way to neutralize their method, they would still have attempted to eliminate him, regardless of his position as vice principal. He clarified that his intentions had changed. At first, he had simply meant to search for a vulnerability, yet he ended up discovering something more. He discovered the celestial source technique, the foundational secret behind all the family's hidden arts. He searched for methods to enhance and refine this flawless secret, unable to halt his relentless pursuit of knowledge. He conveyed his belief that Aster, being fascinated by magic, would relate to what he felt. The remark left Aster speechless with surprise. He came to the unsettling conclusion that was far beyond eccentric. He was utterly deranged. Outrage welled up within him at the audacity to carry out such experiments right in the heart of his family's domain. A sudden realization struck Aster as he linked this discovery to memories from his previous life. The dates lined up exactly. He understood now that the family's true motive for secretly destroying the family was to seize groundbreaking work on the celestial source technique. Had endangered the very existence of the family in his determination to wipe out the. From the outset, he recognized just how much promise this improved technique held. This hidden truth became the source of his immense strength during their last confrontation. Became aware that Astor was unusually quiet. He wondered aloud whether felt any remorse for paying attention, confessing that the situation could easily feel too much to handle. Aster brushed past the remark and redirected the conversation back to the main issue, wanting to know the real reason had chosen to approach him in particular. Revealed that his family remained unaware of his research activities. He suspected that the family had secretly placed a spy in their midst, though he was unable to determine the spy's identity. Astor reasoned that, by following the trail took to acquire the technique, there was a strong possibility that the had intentionally released a partial fix or an unfinished form of the countermeasure. Chuckled as he admitted that once he noticed they were following his movements, he intentionally leaked a portion of the unfinished formula to mislead them, since he also wanted to protect his own life. Aster questioned to himself the reason for not aligning with the family, believing they would almost certainly accept him. Offered an unclear response, mentioning that he had his own private reasons for not taking that action. Clarified to Aster that, because he had no direct connection to his own family, he was counting on Aster to handle a task in secret, away from their family's knowledge. He explained that although the research was a team project, his individual contribution had come to an impasse. He requested that his thesis be delivered to Professor at Xenian Academy. He gave his word that fair payment would be guaranteed. In exchange, the man promised to bestow upon him the magic of restorative light. Aster recognized the offer as a rare and priceless chance. After giving it some thought, they chose to agree to the offer. He decided to increase the challenge by demanding the healing light spell as collateral right away. Later, once the new celestial source technique was finished, he intended to claim that too. He explained his reasoning by insisting that sharing both rewards would bind them as genuine partners, fully committed to the same risk. Considered his actions bold, yet found his reasoning straightforward. If the conditions were not to his liking, he simply refused to participate. Paused to consider Aster's request before nodding his agreement. In his view, the technique's name was unimportant. Since Aster was unfamiliar with the original method, this new version wouldn't benefit him at the moment. Still, assured Aster that he would hand it over once it was finished. On the other hand, presented a requirement of his own. He informed Astor that he might require assistance again before the thesis was finished, and shared his wish that Astor would be willing to help at that time. Because they were both working toward the same goal, the favor seemed minor. Without hesitation, Astor promised his support, as long as it was related to the thesis. While collecting the documents, Astor light-heartedly remarked that he was illiterate. Paused in surprise before Aster revealed he had only been joking, which led to grumble irritably about Aster's lack of manners and dull sense of humor. Afterward, Astor inquired about Professor, wondering aloud if the professor was someone they could rely on. Chuckled, recalling how he and Baron had constantly vied for the top spots, starting from their time at the academy and continuing even after they were promoted to assistant professors. With a weary sigh, he remembered how their rivalry came to an abrupt end the moment he rejoined the family. Astor could never seem to catch up, as the other man consistently stayed a step in front. In his mind, Astor reflected on how dismal and unfair the world felt. Another lunatic, much like, could also be found at the academy. Later, inside Aster's room, puzzled over Aster's actions as he watched him load various items into his subspace pouch, recalling the warning he had received about avoiding detection. Aster spotted an envelope, its seal marked with red wax, resting atop a stack of books. Curiosity led him to break the seal and unfold the letter inside. The message began with a warm greeting addressed directly to him, "To my dear Aster." Aster reacted with a scoff when the word dear was mentioned. The message came from, explaining that the enclosed books contained the spells he needed to master for what lay ahead. Had also listed the sequence in which they should be studied, urging him to follow it carefully so he could develop the wisdom expected of someone in his position. The note was signed with the words, "From your friend." Aster's gaze drifted over the stacks of books and the carefully written letter, recognizing with genuine appreciation that this was an exceptionally thoughtful present. He came to understand that possessed remarkable genius, shown by how he structured a learning journey that led students from the fundamentals of magic to the most complex spells. However, it was just as clear to him that brilliance teetered on the edge of madness. He gave a small smile and thought to himself that it wasn't bad. He took a seat and started jotting down notes. He was creating a list of book donors for the tower he hoped to build, and at the top of that list was. As he tallied up the books he'd collected so far, he realized there were about 132, not counting the healing spell or the thesis on the new technique. He considered that sharing the healing light spell with everyone at his future tower was a separate issue, something he planned to talk over with at another time. Aster's mind conjured up a memory of joyfully embracing a cat, affectionately referring to the animal as his friend. The thought brought a small smile to Aster's lips as he reflected on how fortunate he felt to share that kind of friendship. His mind drifted back to the collection of 132 books that had gifted him. He noticed that the books weren't simply random volumes lying around. Together, they formed a comprehensive body of knowledge. This assortment would allow any aspiring magician to establish a strong base of understanding. His outlook was different now. In the past, his main concern had been collecting as many books as possible within the confines of his tower. At that moment, he understood that the books would define the tower, transforming it into a sanctuary where anyone searching for wisdom could find it. In another place, reflected on his encounter with Aster, viewing it as a surprising benefit. He had first intended to give up the thesis only if Aster proved valuable, planning to dispose of him otherwise. However, his opinion shifted as he began to see Aster as someone intriguing. Recalled how Astor had fearlessly stood his ground when threatened with death. It became clear that there was genuine courage behind the actions, not simply a show of boldness. His gaze revealed a complete lack of concern for whether he lived or died. He considered himself unlike the other pigs, a term he used privately, and took quiet pleasure in this distinction. Sensed that Aster was keeping many secrets, and this mystery only added to his excitement. For the first time, he had met someone who shared his perspective and goals, and even wanted to achieve the same outcomes as him, a sensation that was completely new to him. For a brief moment, he questioned in his mind whether Aster was actually unable to read. He quickly decided that such a thing could never happen. The moment arrived for departure to the academy. Upon Astor's arrival, the maid explained that he would need to complete a few basic forms. She also mentioned that both he and young master did not have to take the entrance exams. She announced to the group that their status as official academy students had just begun. The woman observed that Aster looked good in the new uniform. He expressed his gratitude to her before they began their journey together. Astor believed that influential families were often granted exclusive entry, and he felt this arrangement worked out well for him too. Near the carriage, and ladies stood in anticipation of their arrival. Upon spotting Aster's face lit up with excitement as he eagerly greeted her. She signaled for him to move faster. Lady addressed Aster with a few words before his departure. She urged him to look after his own well-being and shared her belief that he could reach his goals, reminding him that this chance was an important one. Aster expressed her gratitude with a warm smile. While the carriage moved along, Aster silently echoed Lady's words to himself, focusing on the phrase, "What I want." He firmly decided that he would obtain it no matter what. His mind wandered to Xenian, the most prestigious academy in the East, famous for its abundance of potential sponsors waiting for students like him. He planned to collect every single one. He grinned with confidence as he anticipated arriving at his new destination, determined to prove himself to his future co-workers. As the carriage rattled along its path, Aster lost himself in the pages of the books had shared with him. At that moment, he fully understood just how exceptional was when it came to magical research. He recognized that while the fundamentals of magic were straightforward, people could interpret and apply them in countless different ways. He used water to illustrate his point. To certain individuals, it serves as the essence of existence. For some people, it feels like an overwhelming deluge that sweeps everything away. He came to understand that everything depended on how one looked at it. He noticed that each renowned family had created its own distinctive approach to magic, shaped by their individual interpretations of a shared principle. Once Aster had read every enchanted book he carried, an important insight dawned on him. He realized that lesson plans were intricately connected to the cosmic laws upheld by the family. His lively voice broke through his thoughts, cheerfully referring to him as a friend and urging him to take a look at something. They declared their arrival at last. Aster gazed through the window, her eyes searching the world beyond the glass. He found himself standing before the grand and intimidating structure of Xenian Academy. The woman who had traveled with them informed the group that this was the end of their ride. She went on to clarify that, in keeping with the traditions set by the Academy's very first headmaster, every new student was required to walk through the gates on their first day, no matter who they were. She offered her best wishes for their success at the ceremony, expressing her hope that they would acquire valuable knowledge. After that, she took her leave from the group. The moment they began to walk, reached out and seized Astor's arm, signaling with urgency for him to move faster. He anxiously explained that the woman with them had warned that arriving late to the entrance ceremony could mean there would be no seats remaining. Astor thought the idea was odd and dismissed it as ridiculous, believing that an entrance ceremony shouldn't operate like a village play where seating depended on who arrived first. He soon understood that had likely made that comment to motivate and prevent him from becoming complacent. He chose to overlook it for now as they walked into the spacious hall. The place was packed with students when they arrived. Looked around at the crowd, clearly impressed by how many people were gathered there. She admitted to herself that had been correct, realizing that if they had arrived any later, there would not have been any seats left. Internally, Aster disagreed with this assessment. He retrieved a tiny slip of paper and glanced at it, noting that their seats were numbers 11 and 12 in Class M3. Noticed a few vacant chairs and nervously suggested they sit there, worried they might end up without a place to sit. However, Astor advised him to hold on for a little while longer. Astor found himself taken aback, questioning whether this was truly the same individual who had once resisted attending the academy. He also couldn't help but noticed the sudden surge of enthusiasm in the person's demeanor. As made his way toward a seat, his path unexpectedly crossed with another student, resulting in a gentle collision. A person with long, gray hair appeared to be very irritated. The burly man glared at, his voice edged with irritation as he demanded to know what was wrong. Aster hurried over to his side, offering a hand to help him stand and checking to see if he was all right. Still sprawled on the floor, assured everyone with a bright smile that he was uninjured and feeling all right. Turning his attention to the student he had accidentally collided with, he offered an earnest apology, admitting he hadn't been paying close attention to where he was walking. Just as Aster and prepared to go, a student with gray hair halted their steps, calling out to them in a firm tone. He spun around with irritation, demanding to know from what had stained his clothes. Aster answered in a composed manner, mentioning saliva. By observing the man's aura, Aster concluded that he likely belonged to a family of nobility. He assumed that, given the circumstances, would step forward to express regret and attempt to tidy up the man's clothing on his own. As expected, started scrubbing at the man's clothes, offering apologies and energetically promising to restore them to an even better condition than they had been before. The man's frustration grew even stronger. Aster understood that a confrontation could no longer be avoided. The man's anger boiled over as he swung his fist at, his voice erupting with a demand for to leave immediately, calling him a fool. Before he could take any further action, Aster stepped in and seized his fist in a firm grip. Aster expressed to his classmate that, in his opinion, a serious error was about to be made. He advised him to halt immediately. The noble student glared at him with anger, demanding to know his identity. Aster rose to his feet and confidently declared to everyone that was his friend. The student, his tone laced with sarcasm, observed that true loyalty was rare, suggesting that hardly anyone would endure pain for the sake of a friend. Yet, he cautioned that this act of devotion would bring regret before the day was over. Aster let out a deep sigh as he realized that his hopes of befriending his new classmates on the very first day had not worked out as he had intended. He flexed his fingers, pushing thoughts of camaraderie aside. Facing him, his rival clearly chose violence over conversation, ready to fight instead of talk. The noise drew curious students from nearby, and soon a crowd formed as everyone tried to figure out the cause of the disturbance. A few people in the crowd identified the bigger youth, noting that he seemed to belong to the family, though the identities of his companions remained a mystery. Curiosity swept through the onlookers as they debated who might come out on top, with most placing their bets on the boy due to rumors circulating about an exceptional newcomer from that family this year. Just then, a student who seemed to hold some authority forced his way through the gathering, reprimanding everyone for simply standing by while a fight was on the verge of breaking out. Amid the tension, one person timidly suggested whether they ought to intervene. However, the student in charge gave a firm and unwavering rejection. Rather than intervening directly, he instructed the rest to clear a path for them. She requested that the gray-haired boy, who was skilled in magic, create a protective barrier surrounding the area. The event quickly escalated into a public show, drawing the attention of the students, who started wagering on who would come out on top. Most of the crowd voiced their support for the family's representative. Aster observed the events unfolding before them, a faint smile curving their lips. Moved ahead and announced his identity as the younger son from the esteemed V family. The person inquired about what a store was called. Aster explained that, in contrast to the other person, he had no impressive family background and suggested he should simply be seen as a stranger passing through. Flashed a sarcastic grin, dismissing the importance of noble heritage, yet pointed out that the limited size of the arena could pose a challenge for a mage. Claiming it was an act of generosity, he permitted a store to take the initial action. Aster considered the entire scenario to be completely absurd. With a smirk, Aster ridiculed actions. Despite his dislike for conversation, he always seemed eager to share his thoughts at length. She then inquired whether he felt afraid. Felt a surge of anger at the remark, which pushed him to launch an attack. The intense fight began as launched a strong punch toward his opponent. Aster considered sharing an additional observation. They noted that there were actually two powerful individuals present, not only. Believed he could endure a punch from any student skilled in magic. He reeled from the unexpected force behind Aster's punch, his mind racing with disbelief at how someone's fist could carry such power, and he mentally accused Aster of being a rogue. As struggled to comprehend the surprising force that Astor had displayed, confusion clouded his thoughts. He unexpectedly felt the soothing effects of a healing spell envelop him. The truth emerged that had been responsible for performing the healing spell. Despite witnessing the scene, he found himself puzzled by his decision to help the person who was fighting against his friend. Aster quietly remarked to herself how noble families seemed to exist in a world far above her own. Seizing the moment whence attention slipped, he delivered another blow and rebuked for losing concentration. Realized that he was experiencing something completely out of the ordinary. Someone struck him with considerable force. At the same moment, another figure worked to mend his injuries, as unleashed his spells with wild, uncontrollable laughter. His heart thudded fiercely within his chest as he silently accused his tormentors of insanity, desperately hoping for the relief of unconsciousness to escape his terrifying ordeal. He questioned inwardly whether fear was taking hold of him. The crowd began to shout at, questioning his actions and urging him to stand his ground. The crowd erupted into applause, expressing their admiration and assuring him that he embodied the honor of the family, stood as a celebrated figure across the Eastern continent, and represented the aspirations of every martial artist. The group insisted that he finish things swiftly, urging him not to drag out the confrontation. His anger boiled over as the harsh words struck him. He yelled in outrage, unable to believe that someone as insignificant as a mage would treat him with such disdain. Fueled by anger, he swung his fist at Aster, but Aster swiftly avoided the attack. Summoning every last bit of strength within him, he launched the most powerful strike he could muster. An attack erupted, shaking the area with a thunderous blast. The audience erupted in applause, expressing that this was the they remembered. His fist landed squarely on its intended mark. He felt puzzled, unable to understand why the strike seemed so gentle. Suddenly, he watched in disbelief as Aster soared through the air. Aster touched down with practiced ease, her feet meeting the earth without a sound. He gradually rose to his feet and brushed the dirt from his clothes. His anger boiled over, and he unleashed a loud, frustrated cry. Aster remained composed, quietly observing as the other man charged toward him once more. As he reflected on the situation, he realized that had been repeatedly using his abilities to heal. He understood that the only way to finish this battle was to land one decisive hit that would leave his opponent unconscious. Astor resolved to employ a unique method he and his former allies had crafted together in another lifetime. The method depended on harnessing power that formed when mana particles collided. It did not fit the usual definitions of martial arts or conventional magic. The ability emerged purely from the fundamental nature of mana, rather than any learned skill. He referred to this approach as the collision style. Aster launched his move, and a brilliant blue light burst forth with incredible force. The onlookers stared in amazement, stunned by the sheer power of what was unfolding before them. They stared in awe, trying to comprehend the astonishing sight before them. The heavy cloud of dust stirred up by the assault made it impossible to see who had won the fight. The crowd waited with excitement, their eyes fixed on what would happen next. Aster lifted his arms in triumph to announce that he had won, then loudly celebrated his success. Aster encouraged the crowd to increase the volume of their cheers. The crowd answered with wave after wave of cheers, their excitement and amazement echoing throughout the arena as they reacted to the intense and electrifying battle unfolding before them. The people who had placed their hopes on Astor cheered with excitement over their surprising victory. Rushed over to Aster, his voice ringing with excitement as he celebrated their success. Aster, remaining composed, acknowledged the accomplishment with a simple, calm affirmation. Aster gazed at the cheering crowd, silently questioning their innocence. At the same time, a nobleman and his associate observed the event with clear distaste, remarking to each other that a magic student battling in that manner was highly improper. Without warning, a furious man, seemingly an official from the academy, forced his way past the gathered students. He shouted furiously, ordering everyone to clear the area, his voice sharp with irritation as he demanded to know who had the audacity to cause trouble on the very first day of the entrance ceremony. They warned that anyone who didn't leave right away would be forcibly removed. Aster believed he had attracted plenty of attention, yet he remained calm. As a skilled fixer with countless escape strategies, he felt confident, especially since the crowd seemed thoroughly entertained. Before anyone else could react, moved ahead, dragging Aster along. He raised his voice for everyone to hear, declaring that the blame did not belong to the others. He and Aster were the real ones responsible. He gestured toward himself, signaling for her to attract the official's notice on his behalf. The furious official shifted his attention to the group, as remained motionless on the ground behind them. Standing firm, admitted once more that they were responsible. Following the dazzling display and the disruption they had created, Aster found themselves quickly called before an academy official whose expression was stern and unyielding. Within the confines of his strict office, the authority figure addressed them with gravity, pressing for an open and sincere admission of their deeds, expecting them to respond honestly without dodging responsibility. Because they spoke truthfully about what had happened and did not try to hide or reject their involvement, and since the other student was not seriously injured, the official, though hesitant, ultimately chose to let the incident pass without imposing severe consequences. Before allowing them to leave, he fixed them with a piercing, evaluative gaze, and made it plain that their actions would be carefully monitored throughout their stay at the academy. Once Astor stepped out of the tense office, a wave of relief washed over him. The main entrance ceremony still hadn't started, so nothing crucial had been missed. Entering the grand hall, which was packed with incoming students, Astor and his companions immediately drew curious stares. The crowd began to murmur, intrigued by rumors about Astor's slight frame and his unexpected victory over a skilled martial artist, as well as their surprise at the idea of mages engaging in close combat. Excited by the newfound attention, eagerly greeted the onlookers, embracing the spotlight as though they were already famous. In contrast, Astor, favoring peace and anonymity, quietly urged to stop attracting notice, spotting empty seats. His face lit up with happiness upon noticing that their friends had reserved seats for them, and he couldn't help but feel that genuine companionship was life's greatest gift, a sentiment Aster acknowledged with a hesitant, gentle smile. The Academy's headmaster opened the entrance ceremony by delivering an extended and elaborate speech. Astor couldn't help but notice how the headmaster continued his lengthy, dull speech without showing any signs of fatigue or boredom, marveling at the man's remarkable endurance. Struggled to keep his eyes open as the relentless stream of conversation continued, eventually succumbing to sleep and letting a small trail of drool escape onto Astor's shoulder. Feeling a wave of irritation, Aster carefully straightened his clothes, roused him from sleep, and discreetly cleaned away the drool on his mouth to keep it hidden from others. Without warning, an assistant broke into the headmaster's address, delivering news of a pressing issue that demanded the headmaster's prompt attention away from the gathering. The headmaster silently questioned what might surpass the importance of the annual entrance ceremony. However, after hearing the assistants quietly share information with him, his curiosity grew. The headmaster expressed regret to the assembled students before explaining that an important and pressing issue demanded his presence. With visible concern, he wrapped up his address abruptly and exited the stage, his movements hurried and anxious. Following the sudden exit of the headmaster, a striking woman with vivid orange hair made her way onto the stage. Her commanding and regal aura immediately drew the focus of everyone in the audience. All eyes shifted to the woman as her commanding presence struck fear and respect into those around her, leaving them motionless and silent in admiration. Stepped forward and with unwavering confidence announced her name to the gathered crowd. She went on to inform everyone that she would be overseeing the rest of the entrance ceremony, as an unexpected situation had forced the headmaster to leave his speech unfinished. The ceremony began as she proclaimed the commencement of the new student oath, then called upon the youthful representative from the magic department to step forward onto the stage. When the name was brought up, a flurry of murmurs spread through the students. They were astonished that someone from such a prominent and respected family had chosen to sit for the entrance exam just like everyone else. A student questioned whether her abilities might be lacking, but another, who seemed to know more, explained that she was actually the third daughter of the family's leader. It was unthinkable, the student added, that the renowned family would let her participate in the exam if she truly lacked talent. Aster spotted Dahlia right away. He reflected on the remarkable reputation of her family. While the family held the top position as masters of magic across the eastern continent, the family followed closely behind, nearly matching them in both strength and authority. Dahlia was seen as the bright promise and future of her entire family. Aster recalled how she possessed remarkable strength and had supported him significantly following his retirement from his job as a fixer. He reflected on how their connection had never really been about one rescuing the other. Instead, it felt as though they were accomplices, united by shared confidences and ambitions. Aster's face lit up with genuine happiness when he noticed her arrival, clearly pleased to see her starting out as an eager new student. Following those events, called upon the youthful leader of the martial arts department and asked him to step up to the front. Aster realized that the absence of a family name implied he did not belong to any well-known or influential lineage. He understood that this, combined with his earlier victory was likely stirring up bitterness and frustration among the proud, noble family. When the new student oath concluded, the ceremony was formally announced as finished. Informed the audience that it was time to present the professors for the 172nd class, inviting each of them to step onto the stage individually. At the same time, Aster sensed Dahlia's mysterious eyes fixed on him, making him question whether his mind was playing tricks due to the memory they both experienced. He decided not to dwell on the thought, considering it irrelevant for now. While the professors made their way up to the stage, Dahlia tripped unexpectedly, landing in such a peculiar manner that a few people in the audience struggled to hold back their laughter. One after another, the professors stepped up to present themselves, each carrying an air of distinction and authority that set them apart. Aster spotted a familiar face among the professors. The man was Professor, the same instructor Henge had previously mentioned to him. Curiosity sparked in Aster's mind as he questioned late arrival at the ceremony. Professor moved to the front, his voice resonant as he announced that he would be leading the fundamental principles of magic class. Aster felt a jolt of surprise, realizing that Baron was nothing like the person he had pictured in his mind. Instead of resembling in appearance or behavior, Baron turned out to be an entirely unexpected presence. He cautioned himself not to make hasty judgments based on what he saw, knowing that Henge had carefully perfected her outward persona. Informed everyone that the professors had all been introduced, signaling that the entrance ceremony was now over. She instructed the students to go with their assigned supervisors and head to their respective dormitories. Aster gently roused from his slumber, prompting him to awaken with a start and express his astonishment at how swiftly the ceremony seemed to have concluded. Aster made a playful remark, pretending that he had found him asleep and that, as a result, he had been kicked out of the academy. He teased further, suggesting it was time for him to gather his belongings and head back home. Sphere him as he broke down in tears and shouts, wholeheartedly convinced that the prank was real. Aster made his way to his dorm room, reflecting on how managed to react so theatrically to what was really just a harmless joke. He arrived at his room and observed that it was located on the highest floor, offering an impressive view. He stepped into the room, immediately noticing how well-kept and orderly everything was. The space far surpassed what he had imagined it would be. He noticed a few essential everyday items arranged on his desk, and realized that the academy must have supplied identical provisions to every student, treating them all equally. No one would be able to guess someone else's social rank just by noticing their small possessions. He believed that, as the semester progressed, students would eventually have the opportunity to bring in belongings of their own. Aster's gaze landed on his roommate, instantly recognizing the well-known figure from the martial arts department. It was clear to Aster that wasn't pleased by his presence. Instead, his expression was set in a severe frown. With an icy tone, made it clear to him that Aster's actions in the room were of no concern to him. He established a firm rule between them. From that point on, they would not get involved in each other's business or even speak to each other. His voice rang out, sharp and menacing, as she demanded to know whether he grasped the rule. Aster gazed at him with a steady expression, inwardly noting how full of himself the other seemed. Polo grew increasingly irritated by the lack of response, his frustration evident as he demanded an explanation for the silence. Meanwhile, Astor considered Polo's reputation as the leading student in the martial arts department, questioning how powerful Polo truly was and what could be causing him to feel so anxious. Without any prior indication, Astor sprang toward with a quick and unexpected motion. Consumed by anger, unsheathed his sword and confronted Aster, insisting on an explanation for the unexpected assault. Aster observed in silence, his gaze fixed on the man's skilled handling of the sword. He admired how effortlessly the blade was drawn and maneuvered, never once striking any object in the crowded space. Quietly, Aster conceded that the man's fighting abilities were actually quite impressive. The standoff between them was suddenly broken when his voice echoed from the doorway. He stood there, commanding Astor to leave the room at once, announcing his arrival for a visit. Aster reached out and caught just as she was storming off, frustration evident in her muttering. Without hiding her irritation, informed Aster that she was leaving and had no intention of remaining in the room. Aster responded with composure, expressing that it didn't bother him in the slightest. However, he made a request in exchange. He wanted assurance that there would be no complaints if he chose to sing at the top of his lungs until midnight. He then sought confirmation that this arrangement was acceptable to both of them. Outside stood restlessly, eagerly searching for Aster and greeting him with an enthusiastic shout, declaring him as his friend. When they encountered each other, his curiosity led him to question who Aster's fierce-looking roommate was. In response, Aster merely shrugged and admitted he had no idea. Found it odd that his friend couldn't recall his roommate's name. Aster then clarified that it wouldn't have mattered, since had been unconscious through nearly the entire ceremony and wouldn't have recognized him regardless. Filled with excitement, proposed that they spend some time discovering the academy grounds as a group. He remembered how had mentioned the numerous attractions and scenic spots around the area, and recalled the promise he made to her to show Aster around on their very first day. Astor noticed how massive Academy was, and realized that likely intended for both, and him, to become familiar with the school's layout to avoid getting lost later on. Aster nodded in acceptance, thinking that the suggestion could prove to be both harmless and beneficial. Without warning, a faint tingling crept over him, a peculiar feeling that his sharpened instincts quickly recognized, instantly reminding him of experiences from a previous existence. The Fixers were there, silent killers, often called running demons for their swift and elusive movements. Astor saw the tour as a chance to count how many people were present, pushing to pick up the pace and explore the area while pretending to be excited. Gazed in awe at the breathtaking scenery, his voice ringing out with youthful excitement as he expressed his wonder. When he caught sight of a vast, stunning lake, he couldn't help but think of how nothing in his arid homeland compared to its beauty. Aster's energy was nearly spent, the experience reminding him of minding a restless toddler. It dawned on him that had orchestrated this whole ordeal to wear him out. Despite his fatigue, Aster silently promised that he would find a way to return the favor she had done for him. Aster responded with a playful suggestion, telling he ought to request a private lake to be built for him. His eyes widened at the unexpected idea, but he calmly clarified that his plan only involved digging a large pit and pouring in water to fill it. Felt a surge of excitement at the thought, resolving to ask for a version that was both larger and broader than the one before him. Aster wondered aloud to him about what name would suit the new lake best. Came up with the idea to call it Blood, Sweat, and Tears, a choice that Astor found highly entertaining because of how unusual it sounded. Upon catching sight of the beautifully sculpted statue, admired its grandeur. At that moment, Aster once again made a light-hearted remark, humorously suggesting that such a statue should be constructed and bear their name. He also caught sight of a stunning dragon. Far from where the others were, was overcome by an unexpected chill that raced down her back, though she couldn't pinpoint why it happened. Astor concluded that the tour had come to an end, and signaled that it was time for everyone to head back to the dormitory. As Astor walked back, he quietly tallied the number of fixers he had seen, reaching 7 in his count. He guessed that there were probably about 10 fixers spread out across the academy. He identified the second magic hall as the primary location where they assembled and coordinated their activities. The location matched the site of Professor's laboratory, and he reassured himself that Professor was definitely the one they were after. Astor figured out that the family had discovered Henge wasn't acting alone, and as a result, they had started keeping a close watch on Professor, since he was one of the only people known to associate with Henge. Astor noticed a fixer concealed among the nearby bushes, silently observing their group. He grinned inwardly as he noticed that their attention was no longer on him. Instead, they had skillfully shifted their focus to the professor right when the timing was ideal. He gazed at the star-filled sky, making up his mind to uncover just how much they actually understood about Henge's intentions before the night was over. As darkness blanketed the campus, a member of the fixers slipped quietly through the shadows, heading for one of the school's buildings. Inside the shadowy building, 2 masked fixers crossed paths. One of them questioned the other about the whereabouts of their teammates. The second fixer informed him that the rest had already moved on to the appointed spot. The newcomer revealed that they had received direct orders from the top to assemble at the target's nest. When the first fixer sought clarification about whether the orders referred to the main or alternate target, the other confirmed it was the secondary target. He went on to explain that recent intelligence indicated a valuable object would be delivered to the secondary target precisely at midnight, and that they had successfully traced the primary target. The first fixer quickly realized that had finally emerged from hiding. It became clear that, out of all the secondary targets, Professor was the one they had singled out. The remaining fixer grew fearful, questioning how they could possibly take on the renowned single digits, the most skilled of all fixers, and wondering how anyone could expect them to break through the overwhelming strength of the professors without help. He argued that such a risky mission required the presence of one of the top 3 elites. However, his partner broke the news that neither the first, second, nor third elite would participate. Frustration surged through the second fixer upon hearing this, but then his colleague shared an unforeseen revelation. Accompanying the group on their mission was a renowned demon known for his mastery over fire. The fixer's eyes widened in surprise as he recognized the name. He was well aware that held the position of vice captain in the Crimson Jewel Mage Corps, which belonged to the family. He came to understand that was the type of person who would destroy anything standing in his way, stopping at nothing to accomplish his goal. This indicated that their superiors anticipated they would be ready to lay down their lives if necessary. His coworker attempted to soothe his nerves, reasoning that the family would likely avoid direct conflict because sending someone as prominent as on such a dangerous assignment would put them at considerable risk. With this understanding, they both decided to depart without delay. They understood that joining the rest of the group quickly would give them a better shot at making it through alive. At the same time, Astor stood silently on his balcony, his mind turning over the crucial detail he had learned. Something significant would happen at midnight. The name echoed clearly in his memory. Astor remembered as a formidable force, someone who had reached the height of his strength during Astor's earlier existence. Following a brutal conflict with the family came close to bringing about their own ruin. Throughout the family's decline and disintegration, devotion never wavered. Even though faced peril at this moment, his greatest strength had emerged following the catastrophic war. He became known throughout history as the relentless fire demon of, leaving his mark for generations to remember. Astor recognized that this chance was one she could not afford to lose. He resolved that obtaining something from was essential, since his flame belonged to the hidden practices of the old arts, and the potential benefits outweighed the dangers of confronting him. Astor understood that the fixer who had been observing him had quickly withdrawn for this very reason, thinking that letting this opportunity slip away would be a huge loss. Yet, confusion still lingered in Astor's mind. He was holding on to the thesis everyone was seeking. Even though the others insisted the thesis would reach Professor, Astor felt completely confident that his version of the thesis was genuine. It became clear to them that the item must be the thesis, suggesting that something crucial was still absent from the complete picture. Astor quickly realized that the thesis scheduled for presentation later that evening was likely a decoy, intended to mislead others. As night settled in, Astor feigned a deep slumber, his breathing slow and even. Meanwhile, moved quietly through the shadows, donning his dark attire and gathering the tools and weapons he would need for the mission ahead. Checked on Astor, confirming he was sound asleep in his bed, before quietly slipping out of the room. At the same time, Professor sat absorbed in his work, scribbling notes at his desk in the dimly lit office. Instincts alerted him to the presence of unwelcome guests, sparking a surge of fury toward the despised scoundrels. Though he had endured their distant surveillance, the notion that they would brazenly trespass into his domain was intolerable. As a masked individual cautiously pushed open his office door, stood directly in their path, fully aware of their arrival. He sensed from the person's aura that he was a mercenary for hire. The intruder's astonishment was clear when the professor identified him without hesitation, unveiling that the mysterious figure was none other than. Approached with composure, pointing out that mastering control over one's energy was essential for anyone hoping to remain undetected, as this fundamental skill formed the foundation of stealth and infiltration. The possibility of another chance remained uncertain. Baron came to the startling conclusion that Henge orchestrated the entire scheme. He understood that Henge had attempted to sneak the thesis away without noticing, only to end up ensnared by the very trap he had hoped to avoid, looking foolish in the process. He immediately caught his mistake, realizing that the sly Henge was far too clever to be caught by such a simple trick. As he considered the situation, he grew increasingly curious about what Henge's real intentions might be in this tangled scheme. Without warning, a powerful blast shattered the office wall, reducing it to rubble in an instant. A man with flowing red hair stepped into the room, flashing Professor an exaggerated, welcoming grin. The man said his name was, though he doubted that a professor who spent all his time in a lab would recognize it. Polo stared in disbelief, taken aback by the arrival of an unexpected guest. Paid no attention to, and instead directed her gaze toward. She gestured at him, implying through her actions that the sword he wielded marked him as nothing more than a low-paid mercenary. Interrupted, his tone icy, and stated that the man's name was completely unfamiliar to him. Demanded that end his foolish behavior and address the matter with sincerity. With an icy tone, remarked that the repulsive odor was so strong it could cause his own nose to decay. This harsh comment caught off guard, as he had never experienced such rudeness before. Couldn't hold back his laughter, clearly amused by the unusual treatment he was receiving, something he admitted had never happened to him before. Without wasting any more time, he shifted to a serious tone and declared that the man he indicated would not survive the night. The professor might show mercy by allowing the man to keep just one eye and one arm. A sudden and intense fight broke out as positioned himself protectively in front of, releasing a powerful surge of freezing energy to shield him. The blast was so powerful that it rocked the entire building, causing its very foundations to tremble. Stared in disbelief as the explosion unleashed a force far greater than she had ever imagined. Informed him that, from this moment forward, he would no longer regard him as a student. As a mercenary, he understood that his survival depended solely on his abilities and his determination to safeguard his own life. Nodded in determination, his hand tightening around the hilt of his sword as he prepared himself for a battle that could cost him his life. Silently questioned why the Academy's alarms remained silent, even after an explosion so intense and damaging had shaken the grounds. Professor determined that the rats living in had likely hidden the whole area behind a magical shield, effectively stopping any alarms from being triggered. He questioned inwardly whether placing his faith in this anxious-looking, inexperienced mercenary was a wise choice. On the far side of the room, his attention was drawn to an envelope lying on the ground, its stench unmistakably reminding him of the foulness he associated with the realized that had no intention of giving up what he desired without a struggle, leaving uncertain about his next move. With a mischievous grin, The character hinted at wanting some excitement, and suddenly released a powerful blast of fire that surged across the entire room. Became aware that there were more trespassers nearby. As he glanced over his shoulder, he noticed a sizable crowd of fixers hurrying in the direction of the building where they were hiding. The clash grew fiercer as blazing fire surged with overwhelming force. The teamwork between and allowed them to blend their defensive and offensive skills seamlessly. From a hidden spot in the darkness, Aster observed everything unfolding before her. At that moment, it seemed to her that everything was finally becoming real. Aster slipped his mask over his face and pulled up his hood, his thoughts drifting back to the distant days when he had set aside his true identity and taken on the role of Fixer Number 1. He watched the explosions erupting far away and realized the moment had come for him to step onto the stage and play his role. Aster tilted his face upward, directing a mocking plea toward the moon, hoping it would grant him the virtue of being a just problem solver, if only for the day. He quickly revised his statement, confessing that not once in his life had he truly acted with righteousness. He raced at full speed toward the heart of the conflict. During the heat of the fight, taunted, expressing surprise at how well was managing to defend himself despite being just a little-known mercenary. Struggled to catch her breath, completely worn out from fatigue. He harbored resentment over surviving the assaults, attributing his escape solely to the protection amulet his captain had provided, which he believed was nothing more than a fortunate accident. Just then, Baron instructed him to step aside. Advanced with determination, positioning himself directly in front of, ready to confront him without hesitation. He shifted his attention to, acknowledging that his abilities were better than expected, and that he might be worthy of more trust than he had originally believed. Baron observed the radiant sword clutched in his grip, and wondered if was relying on enhancement magic to make his strikes more powerful. He wondered aloud whether he might be able to defend against a greater number of fire attacks. With unwavering resolve, Polar made it clear that he would stop them at any cost. The situation had shifted beyond mere skill. Survival now hung in the balance. Failure would mean a death sentence for him. Observed the pair with a smile, noting to himself that the combination of a mage and a guard made for a formidable team and would offer a worthy challenge. He unleashed a fierce, straightforward blast of fire aimed right at. Despite the danger, the second person managed to courageously defend against the assault and stopped it. The intense battle raged on, as skillfully defended herself while launching attacks at the same time. As fended off the oncoming magical assaults from the other fixers, it became clear to him that if things continued this way, he would end up constantly falling back and protecting himself, never getting a chance to move forward. Faced with the circumstances, he realized he needed to act boldly and embrace the possibility of failure. Clarified that when the amount of mana in the environment was scarce, and two individuals gave opposing orders, they would become locked in an intense struggle for dominance over it. He confronted head-on, questioning how much strength could drain from him if they faced off openly. Came to understand that was seeking an open confrontation to seize both power and control over magic. He agreed to the contest, his laughter echoing as he prepared to find out which of them held greater strength. A tremendous clash erupted as their blue and red energies met, triggering an explosive force that obliterated everything nearby. Caught in the chaos of the fierce, magical battle, Polo fought to keep his balance, silently blaming his misfortune for landing him in such a predicament. He came to understand that the two men were genuine monsters, and he recognized that he had absolutely no way to interfere in their battle. They regretted not settling their differences through a fight right from the start, wishing it could have all been resolved early on. The remaining fixers observed the chaotic storm of magic, noting among themselves how fierce and deadly the battle had become. Their commander instructed everyone to stay put, warning that charging in at this moment would be fatal, and suggested they use the time to recover and remain alert for a safer chance to act. Without warning, a figure lurking in the darkness sprang out and attacked one of the fixers. A fixer urgently alerted the group, explaining that an assassin had prepared a deadly trap in their path. Aster lunged forward with astonishing swiftness, charging directly into the fierce clash unfolding between and and remained deeply absorbed in their ongoing battle for dominance. Aster entered the room, his presence made known by a soft but chilling tone that sent shivers through those who heard it, and stared in shock as a store appeared before them without warning. Could hardly believe what had happened, and fury surged through him. Without warning, Aster materialized right before him and launched a swift, decisive assault. He proclaimed that he would meet his end in this very place. The blow broke through Scarred, and he realized that unless he responded immediately, his life would be in grave danger. Kalihin unleashed a burst of intense flames, forcing Aster to retreat and widening the gap between them. The impact hurled him a great distance, and as he landed, he began to cough violently, blood spilling from his mouth. Aster stepped out from the blast, completely unharmed, and charged it once more. Felt a surge of fear as he sensed his mana twisting out of control, turning against him and moving in the opposite direction. The remaining fixers took advantage of the moment, rushing forward in a frantic effort to prevent a store from getting to. Wounded and desperate, hurriedly retrieved a potion, hoping it would help him control the surge of energy threatening to overwhelm him. Curiosity sparked about the origins of Aster, whose incredible strength seemed almost inhuman. At the same time, he observed how Astor moved and fought. Despite the circumstances, he found himself thoroughly amazed. He observed that every motion was executed with absolute precision, and each spell was cast with remarkable speed and accuracy. Found himself startled, questioning whether he genuinely admired the enigmatic stranger who had arrived without warning. His long-suppressed rage erupted, causing immense, radiant red magic circles to materialize around him. He yelled that the identity of the mysterious stranger was a mystery to him, yet he promised to end the intruder's life and ensure he would pay dearly for getting involved. A tremendous surge of fire erupted from his magic circles, engulfing the fixers, who were caught helplessly within the destructive wave. Aster stood in the midst of the blazing assault, confronting it with unwavering resolve as his mask concealed his features. The blast surged across the whole area, consuming all it touched in a wave of intense, burning fire.